Welcome to another episode of Every Church a Peace Church. This is a program that promotes the belief that the church could turn the world towards peace if the church lived and taught as Jesus lived and taught. Welcome back. I'm Don Edwards. I'm your host for this program, and we have an exciting program with an exciting and informative guest from Palestine, from the West Bank. His name is Sami Awad. He's the executive director of the Holy Land Trust in Palestine. And what we're going to talk about today during this program is what is it like to live as a Palestinian under Israeli occupation? What is the alternatives to the suicide bombing and the helicopter attacks? Is there a solution? We're going to talk about the roadmap that's been so highly promoted. What is the roadmap of peace? Is it working? Will it work? These are the ideas that we're going to discuss during this program. And I'd like at this time to welcome Sami Awad. Sami, welcome to Every Church a Peace Church.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're so honored and pleased to have you on your tour of the United States. And you're going to be here for 10 days or so?
I wish. I will be in Atlanta for 2 days.
2 days, okay. Yeah. And then you're going on to other places.
Yes. I started out in the Midwest and then went to the West Coast, and now I'm on my way back to the East Coast.
Well, welcome back to Atlanta.
Thank you. It's good to be here, yes.
I want to have you discuss what is the Holy Land Trust. You live in Bethlehem, and that's a town in the West Bank.
Yes.
A very famous town.
Yes, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the organization that you are directing, the Holy Land Trust.
Yes. The Holy Land Trust is an indigenous Palestinian organization. It was established in 1998. And the way it was established is very interesting because it is based on a story of the Bible. In the year 2000, we did a project which was the reenactment of the journey of the Magi, the wise men who came from the East. And we had people from different parts of the world travel in the same route as the Magi would have 2,000 years ago to come and honor the Prince of Peace, Jesus, who was born in Bethlehem. And the travelers walked for 99 days in the desert, from just south of Baghdad to Bethlehem, walking and on camelback, and they arrived in Bethlehem on Christmas Day, the year 2000, to celebrate the millennium. And part of the journey, and the title of the journey, was called The Pilgrimage for Peace. And Holy Land Trust was founded on this question: what is peace? What can we do for peace in the Middle East? And our mission statement, or our logo, is to strengthen and encourage the community. And that is the most important thing that you could do to achieve peace, is to build the community. We work on two fronts in Palestine. The first is, what can we do to encourage the community, first to live under occupation and survive, and then the second one, to resist and end the occupation of our lands. And the second question we ask always is, what comes after occupation? What kind of state will Palestine be? Will it be a democracy or not? Will there be respect for freedom of worship for all religions, freedom of expression, to elect your representatives the way you want, and so on? So we need to liberate Palestine, but we also need to develop a democracy in Palestine for the future.
Well, the images that we get in our media, images of blood and gore, images where Palestinians have committed themselves to violent acts of suicidal bombings in Israel, and countering that would be Apache helicopter attacks, firing missiles into traffic jams, exploding and injuring anyone around it. And then a response, again, of violence, what we have come to know as a cycle of violence. What is it like as a Palestinian to live in that environment, and also an environment where your lands are occupied by the Israeli military, and that your freedom of movement from one place to another has to go through checkpoints, much like South Africa was before their resistance led to a democratic existence.
Yeah, the situation is, as you said, we live in prisons, and even in our resistance, we are resisting from prisons. And last year, I was on a similar speaking tour when we met for the first time, and I was talking about prisons over there being prisons because of the checkpoints and the roadblocks and the roads that have been dug out where we cannot move from one area to the other. This year it's a little different because we are living in a literal prison. We are being surrounded now, at least in Bethlehem where I live, by this fence that is surrounding the entire Bethlehem district. We didn't have this last year. The fence has barbed wire on it, has electric wires on it, cameras, sensors, roads for military vehicles, Israeli military vehicles to use to travel around this. So we are in a literal prison living now, and the conditions are very difficult. People are more and more becoming hopeless. Even when we think we have reached the bottom, we always find that the bottom can be even deeper. And people are depressed, people are desperate. Economically, we're at 65% unemployment. A lot of people depending for their simple daily bread on charity organizations, Christian organizations, Muslim organizations, Red Cross, Red Crescent. These are providing the daily bread for many people. So it's a very, very difficult living conditions, and people do not see hope in the future.
Now, you are a Christian. You're a Palestinian Christian. And it was heartbreaking to see how the Church of Nativity, we all were saddened and tearful about that siege, and to see that the actual birthplace of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, being surrounded by tanks, and the occupants, the monks being killed, and others. I guess you were part of that experience right there, close hand.
Yes, it was a very an experience that we will not forget for several reasons. First, we live not far from the Church of Nativity. So from our apartment building where me and my wife and daughter live, we overlook the church, so we could see many of the things that happened to that church during the time. And we continuously suffered from many of the activities that took place. For example, the bombings, the shootings that took place in and around the Church of Nativity, the attempted use of, for example, loudspeakers that had voices of animals or to disturbing sounds in order to put psychological pressure on those who were inside the church. All of us heard this. In addition to living 40 days and 40 nights under curfew and not able to leave our homes. And it's a personal thing for us. It's because our daughter was born during the siege of the Church of Nativity. And it was very difficult because living under curfew, we didn't know what to do, how to be able to handle that. We couldn't go to hospitals to take my wife for birth. One thing that I was doing at the end was I was on the internet in our house, and like, how do you give a birth to a child at home? Just really trying to figure out what to do, because if we are under curfew again, we can't move. And if it wasn't for some friends of ours who are British citizens working as journalists, who had some sort of free leeway to travel in the streets, who helped me and my wife go to Jerusalem a few days before our baby's birth, and we were able to have the child there. And it was very dangerous. We drove by tanks just to head to Jerusalem during that time. So it's a memory for us, something we will never forget. But it was very difficult times, and these difficult times have continued ever since. People talk about the siege of the Church of Nativity as one episode, but this is something that we live almost every single day.
Yes, and that's the sadness of this whole experience, and this roadmap, this peace roadmap that's being promoted by the current administration. How do you view that? Is that something that might lead to a resolution, lead to peace in the Middle East?
Well, I believe that ultimately the two sides have to sit down and negotiate. It is not through violence that this conflict will be resolved. People really need to engage and sit together at the table. The problem with this roadmap is that it is not doing this. It has set up conditions and requirements that, for me as a Palestinian, I see them as unjust and as not addressing any of the major and main concerns of the Palestinian problems.
What are those main concerns from you as a Palestinian and as a representative of, or someone that's on the ground and has a sense of the pulse of the people there in Palestine?
Yes, very similar to what happened in the Oslo peace times. You know, the 7 years that were invested in the Oslo peace process, we are going through the same thing, and even with a lesser hope for an outcome than previously. Many people really do not have any expectation that this would achieve anything. Some of the main issues, again, that have been put on the back shelf are issues that deal with the settlements, deal with Jerusalem, deal with the refugees, the borders of the Palestinian state. Security issues for Palestinians as well have been ignored completely. Many of the activities that are being conducted by the current Israeli government are also not being checked by the roadmap, such as building of an apartheid wall to divide Palestinian areas from each other, which has continued at full strength even during this roadmap.
Tell us about this wall. I understand that the Israeli government is building a wall in the West Bank that's twice as high as the Berlin Wall. It's made out of brick and concrete. And how long is it?
Well, by the time it's done, it will be over 700 kilometers in length.
That's
maybe close to 500 miles or 400 miles, and so on. I'm not sure exactly.
And then there's like little towers, guard towers.
Exactly.
That are placed around the wall, and that's still being built.
Exactly. Yeah. This
wall. And this is being built in the land that's supposedly the ultimate result would be to return back to the Palestinians. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. This wall is not being built on the international borders recognized to be the occupied territories, the land of 1967.
Yeah.
This wall is being built inside of that territory, as deep as they can go, the Israeli government can go to Palestinian residential areas, meaning confiscating more land of the West Bank on either side, on the Jordan River side in the Gulf and on the Israeli border side, creating literal prisons for us to live in. And as you said, they're very thick walls built with monitoring towers on them, cameras, sensors, and so on. The excuse and justification and the selling pitch that they've tried to sell to the Americans and to their own public, the Israelis, is that this wall is built for security, to provide security for the Israeli people. But this wall has not been able to provide this security, and is really being built in order to create this area, this fact on the ground, where the highest concentrations of Palestinians would live in these areas, and then when a peace negotiation is signed, they would say, well, this is where you are, then this is your state, and this is where you will live. And it will be built on 40% of the West Bank. That means 60% of the West Bank, the 1967 territory, will be confiscated for Israel. It will become part of Israel. And we would have these islands inside there that are called Palestinian state.
Yeah, much like the Bathustans in South Africa, where the South African government under the apartheid concentrated populations of African people, surrounded them with confined them, and then controlled their in and out, and basically providing small areas where you can have this piece of land amidst the land that's controlled and surrounded by another another people, another nation.
Exactly. Yeah, it is an apartheid system. It is a racist system. The ironic thing is we had somebody come from South Africa, and we were taking this person around and showing them the area, and we were pushing, this is bamboo stands and so on. And he actually started laughing. He said, this is not even close. You are living in prisons. Bamboo stands, we had some sort of freedom of movement, at least inside them. We were able to get in our cars and travel around. You are living in literal prisons in these areas. So don't even compare it to our situation. This is even much worse than the South African example. But to us, this is, the idea of separating people from each other, ethnic, religious, national groups from each other, and condensing an entire population into one area is what we live in now.
Yeah. Well, how do you resist it? The resistance of violence is a alternative that has not worked. It doesn't follow the path of the Jesus that we recognize as one who stood up to oppression, violent oppression, with arms open and stretched in love and forgiveness. That's how the Christian and the Christ, the Jesus that I see, and I believe we share that. How do you resist this type of oppression successfully?
As you have said, violence has not worked, and Palestinians have tried and have been trying armed resistance, which under even international law and Geneva Conventions is a right to resist this oppression through these means, has not worked. Maybe not the suicide attacks and these activities, but for many Palestinians, they don't see other means. They don't see another option. Even if we talk about armed resistance, we don't have the weaponry or the military or the technology like Israel has or like the United States or other countries have to resist. And that's why even many Palestinians, especially the extreme groups, see suicide attacks as the only way. And when we talk to them about this, they said, well, it's not something that we want to do. But, if you give us the F-16 fighter jets and the Apache helicopters and the tanks, then we will use those. We won't do the suicide attacks and so on. And maybe these conventional forms of warfare would then be accepted, even though they will cause much more death and destruction. We don't want any of that, and we know that. And we know, the Israeli army is the 4th or 5th strongest army in the world. You can't beat them through military means.
And nuclear power.
And nuclear weapons as well that they have. They're the only country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons and so on. So
and probably other weapons of mass destruction as well.
Probably. But, I don't want to do like George Bush and accuse them of it and say they have it without having
Well,
facts,
we do know that they have nuclear weapons, but they deny that they have that, I believe.
But what we say is, for the sake of the Palestinian population as well, not just for the sake of resisting, that we as an organization working with many other Palestinian groups and organizations, Muslim and Christian, secular and so on, are pushing for nonviolence as a means to resist and to end occupation. That is our mission. And nonviolence to me is something that is very selfish as well, because you don't only resist an occupation through nonviolence, you build communities, you build societies, empower people, build democracy through nonviolence as well. So I see this as something for us as Palestinians to be engaged in.
Is Martin Luther King, is that a figure, a philosophy that's discussed in Palestine and in your work?
Very much so. We focus a great deal on the teachings of Reverend Martin Luther King in the United States with the civil rights movement, a link to different examples. It is not a similar situation. We know that. Each area has from here to India to Denmark under Nazi occupation, each area had different means of dealing with oppression, and oppression was conducted differently. But we teach the principles taught by Martin Luther King here in the United States with the civil rights movements and so on, and non-cooperation, similar to India's example with Gandhi and so on. So we focus a lot on that.
Well, in the Black Freedom, Southern Black Freedom movement, it did yield not only results to a measured level in securing civil rights, but it also provided an example, a worldwide example, that you can successfully overcome oppression and violence through an example of just of kneeling down and standing up, and with hands open rather than closed. And it did build community, which is something that I hear you saying in the Palestinian, with that type of pressure and with that unemployment and the economic destruction of the Palestinian people under this occupation. The idea of community is sometimes a luxury, that we just look at survival, being able to make sure that your child is born safely, that you're able to provide the food for your family, that you have enough food during the hours that you're permitted to go out and get it. Safety being that as you see a helicopter up in the sky, are you next to somebody that's their target? And being able to develop community is an important objective that I'm hearing you saying, and I think is something that did flow out of the Black Southern Freedom Movement, in the sense that people did have a sense of a common objective, and then a moral energy that can arise from standing and resisting evil and oppression nonviolently.
That's right.
And with that moral energy, it widened the community, and it provided a sense of again, movement. And I think that's what the Holy Land Trust is attempting to do.
That's exactly what we're focusing on. When we talk about nonviolence, a great part of our trainings and our courses that we teach are not focused on the Israeli occupation. It's not focused on different means and tactics of resisting the occupation. These are something that will happen and will need to happen. But the first part of our trainings and our courses is again focused on building community, resolving many of the internal disputes and conflicts that have arisen from the tremendous pressure that exists on the people. Like we said, unemployment is high, people are not able to provide for their children, tension is high within the community, and people are not able to reflect this frustration and anger on who is causing this. For example, those who are involved in suicide attacks and any form of armed resistance against the occupation are less than 3% of the Palestinian population who are directly involved in this. But the other sad statistic is that it is only 5% that are involved in nonviolent means of resisting, because many people are just simply focusing on survival and how do we just survive today and tomorrow and so on.
Yeah, I've always thought or felt when I look at some of these images and recognizing that, the violence is not the answer in the situation, that why is it continuing being pursued when I think that it would present a more powerful force, or a force more powerful, if you had the Palestinian people, with arms out, marching by the thousands up against the Israeli military, and just kneeling down, Christians, Muslims, of any faith or no faith, and then just get that image and then see if I mean, if you're going to die, if you're going to commit suicide by attaching bombs, then then die nonviolently, like Jesus died nonviolently when he was executed. And it seemed to me that would be a strategy, a tactic that might have much more result than what we're seeing happening back and forth.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think Palestinians will reach that point.
But they have to be organized.
And it has to be organized. It has to be built from the grassroots up.
Yeah.
It has to be a community effort. Palestinians have been engaging in nonviolent resistance for many years. Even
you don't hear
as
about
far
it.
back as 1936. Palestinians engaged in what is known as the 6-month general strike against the British mandate at that time. And Gandhi in India praised that. And he was telling people in India that if we had 1/10 of what these Palestinians are doing, then we would have been liberated a long time ago. So this is something that I am proud of having in our history and so on. But today, even today, Palestinians are engaged in nonviolent, but all of these activities are sporadic, being conducted in different places. And what we are trying to do by building and focusing on the community is creating this national initiative where we will have the thousands of people who will go out on the street and say, enough. We're tired of this, we are done, and we need our freedom, and we don't care.
I know that we're running short of time, but I know that you had an uncle who was also very prominent in Palestine, promoting nonviolence as a solution. And what happened to him?
Well, another reason why nonviolence has been very difficult to implement, because the Israeli government and military fears nonviolence. They are not able to counter nonviolent resistance, and they do not want nonviolence to exist in the Palestinian community. And my uncle, who was very involved during the first uprising, the first Intifada in 1987, was arrested and deported in 1988, and he is still not able to come and live back in Palestine or to his home. He is now in Washington, D.C.
Well, Sami, if you want more information about Sami Awad, his organization, then go to the website there, www.holylandtrust, one word, holylandtrust.org. And I hope that's appearing on your screen. Again, I'd like to thank you all for being with us. This is going to be a 2-part series. We're going to have Sami Awad back next week to pick up this conversation. So in the meantime, seek peace, find peace, and most of all, be peace. Thank you for tuning. Watch for the rebroadcast of this show, and God bless.
How long will it take till we realize we made a big mistake? You turned our back on us. And how long will it be till the world can finally see